can't fix the problems of the world.
Yeah.
I can't. It's gotta be hyper local.
Yes.
The pockets of liberation have to endure.
Yeah.
And have to become permanent.
Yeah.
On the path to liberation in your world.
Welcome back to another episode of Keepin It a Bean. Keepin It a Bean is where culture and commentary and coffee, but today's not really coffee because we decided this is given after dark.
Yes. After dark?
There we go.
Politics after dark.
Harris, thank you.
Yeah, you gotta do that all over. You about to tell the world, yeah.
And I'm take that one out. Now, this person, you are not. My audience is not unfamiliar with this person at all. This is number 3 of you being on the pod, and I am really excited to get into this conversation. We don't even need, you got any hot takes you need to get off your chest first?
I do. It's actually relevant to the conversation.
All right, you don't got to tell me twice. And so real quick, you already know what it is. Political strategist, podcaster, activist, all the things. Salaah is back. What up, though?
What up? Happy to be here. Happy to be here.
I knew I had to bring you back to talk about some shit.
Yeah.
Because there has been some major changes that have been going on recently. And I immediately was like, this is the person to bring back when the pod comes back immediately. And it was perfect timing and alignment. And so much to kind of talk about. But before we get into all of that, y'all already know what it is. It's the Keeping It a Bean segment. And so this is anything you need to get off your chest, anything you need to get off your spirit. But I think yours might be a little bit more in tune that'll lead us into a larger conversation.
Yeah. Yep.
So I'm going to start us off with the Keeping It a Bean tonight. No, I won't talk about quarter zips this time. So sorry. However, if I'm going to keep it a bean, do not come to me with half-ass plans anymore. I've been trying to explain to people, I don't got time for people to just kind of say, oh, this is kind of what I'm feeling like doing type situation. And this could be in the workplace. This can be in personal life.
Yep.
I'm not in a space where I want to think for other people at this current iteration of life. And so I'm very busy. I'm stretched in a little bit more during the season with so many more things coming up. And so I actually prefer spontaneity more so than actually saying, oh, can you help me plan this thing out? I'm not in the space of planning right now because I'm planning and decision making so often that I'd rather just kind of be in the moment, or you just say, Marquise is all I need you to be at.
Right.
Just show up, have a great time. That's all I need.
That's, honestly, that's fair. Two things I think about in that. One, I've been doing cold calling more, randomly calling like people I know and friends and shit, and they answer, which
I love that.
Is like new because I used to be very much I will ignore your phone call and then text you, what do you want?
Yeah.
Cause like, come on now.
Give me some courtesy. I need to
give me some courtesy. Yeah, I might be on a shitter. I might just be walking. I might not be in the mood to talk. And so I've been doing more cold calling and being more intentional about I'm going to reach out, but also don't waste my time.
Right.
Stop wasting my fucking time. I'm busy. We busy. I can't get that back. If we're going to do something, let's commit and let's do it. And let's be intentional around it. Or if I hit you up and be like, yo, would you want to grab a drink on Thursday? Yeah, just let me know. And it's I'm letting you that I just did. This is the invitation right now. I need a yes or no.
That's it.
And I'm just, when I get that, I'm like, all right, I'm not wasting my time anymore.
No, not at all. Oh, me and you are in the same type of time because that's really where I'm at. I was telling my friends, I was like, I need us to work like Chelsea or Eddie from That's So Raven or Kimmy from Full House type situation. Knock on that door. Can you come out to play? No, but you can come inside and we can chill out and have a drink.
Yes.
We can chill out and watch a movie, watch a TV show, or just be in my space.
Yep.
And so it's funny, I've been telling folks a lot more. I'm just like, there are a couple folks that have a key to my apartment where I'm just like, actually, if I show up here and you are here, I actually am going to be like, hey, yo, how you doing? I'm going to go over, change, do whatever I was going to do anyways. And that person just here in company.
I love that.
Truly and honestly, I'm just not, that don't mean everybody got a key. But there are folks in here where I'm just like, no, I absolutely just appreciate this company. And so I think we need to just kind of bring back instead of trying to do a 48 hours notice, actually just kind of show up. Because 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to leave that conversation and be like, I'm glad I did that.
Yep. Yep.
9 times, every single time.
Yep.
So that's my hot take. We need to show up like those neighbors where you just be like, why you be in here? And you can have like your jazzes and go home Rogers. Like,
absolutely. Absolutely.
Go home
but
Rogers,
it's with love.
But it's with love.
It's with love.
Because they came back.
Now I can't do that because my wife would kill me.
Yes.
Ain't nobody gonna have no key to my place. But I used to have, when I lived alone before we got together, I had to have a group of people that had a key to my place because I would lock myself out. And
I get that.
There is nothing worse than a black man breaking into his own place because even though it's a majority black city, I'm still black and people will call the cops on me. Correct. And so I was like, all right, I need you to have a key. I need you to have a key because like, I love that. I love that. That's dope.
Yeah. So, what you keeping it a being about?
I'm keeping it a being about, or my hot take is, if we are not careful, the progressive movement is going to recreate the same systems of caste that have kept us oppressed for generations.
Say more about that because that's a take and a half.
So, I've been in this interesting period in my life. I had a conversation with a friend of mine who posed this question to me, and I've been sharing it with other people. Yeah. Shout out to my friend who put me onto this question, but she was like, what political heartbreak is fueling your life right now?
Ooh.
And I was like, damn, that's deep. That's really deep because that really does tell, like, especially for us who do a lot of political work, a lot of organizing work, a lot of community building, that really does tell where you are, how you think about the work in the current moment and the iteration that you're in. And so for me, that has been how I've been thinking about this, right? We, don't get me wrong, like the progressive movement is, the structures and the institution that exists within it are the best path forward that we have to operate in. But if we are not careful, it can, and in some cases have, recreated the same systems of caste, but just changed the ordering, just changed who is at the top, who's at the middle, who's at the bottom.
Right.
And
so it's still hierarchical.
It's still hierarchical.
It's like serving as
very much so.
Ecosystem.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And if we're not careful, that will get instilled and in place. And it may not necessarily be by and large with the whole ecosystem, but it might be within that wing in that community that you belong to. Yeah. And that's just as harmful as it is with our current racial system of caste with white people at the top, being white dominant, and black people of color, black women being on the bottom.
Right. Oh, shit. The political heartbreak and then a recreation of a caste system just with a different face there. Yeah. I mean, like... Because it is essentially keeping the status quo for most things.
It is.
And that's... Ooh.
It is, right? Like, how do we... and many progressive spaces and many, what we call movement spaces, right? Because some people hearken over the word progressive. Some people kind of like, hearken over the word left, right? But just movement spaces, right? When the movement of, we recognize this system is fucked and it's taking advantage of us. It is, what often happens is we look at individuals who are like the worse off. Yeah. And say, that's the person that should be the decision maker. That's the person that should be at the top telling everybody else what to do. That should be our Messiah. Right. Which is harmful because nobody should be the Messiah. Nobody should be that, right? We are the only people. We are all flawed people. Right. But when that is the case, that person is unflawed. Yeah. And it means that it's just reordering who's setting the tone, the tempo. It means that also then means, well, who's on the bottom then?
Well, yeah, because that to me is like interesting because you're right, because a lot of my politics is like, if once we help the most marginalized, we inherently help everybody else. However, when we reorient who is the most marginalized, how does this then happen? Because so there's almost like unintended consequences to that philosophy. It's like well intentioned. It's well intentioned, right? Yeah. It's well. We can get into whether it's well-intentioned, but it is like we had that moment of recognition.
I don't know, because like, concentration of power is very attractive, and that's what ends up happening. And so when there's this concentrations of power, right, my experience, while may have been harmful, may have been, an issue, becomes, when it becomes a central theme,
Yeah.
And when I'm responding from trauma, especially when I'm responding from trauma,
yeah,
I'm traumatizing everybody else that is
which
a part
I
of
think
that.
is also fascinating because it's even something we learn around being trauma informed in schools is it like if there's a person who is harmed, sometimes it's not best to have their best friend in the space with them. It's better to have a neutral third party in the space with them in order for it to not add on to different biases. So they serve as a better communicator of what is actually happening and gathering of information. And so there's a both. What I'm hearing is like there's definitely a both and aspect to what you're actually talking around. Is like, yes, let's actually talk around these lived experiences and who are the folks that can communicate it and learn like these are some of the pain points, but you might not, because of your experience is so attached to it from an emotionally driven space, like have the emotion, and we need to turn that emotion into, what is it, righteous indignation? Like we need to now put that energy somewhere else. And so how do we actually motivate that? I love that.
Yeah.
Because there's a both and
I've been thinking a lot of about that. And like I said, in this current political season that I'm in, because I've both been a victim and experience, but also have seen how that reordering starts to be harmful to the values that we say we hold, right? Especially when we talk about, are we being restorative? Do we care about restorative justice? Do we care about not just you as a victim being whole, but someone else as the perpetrator also being whole in that moment?
Well, that's a harder politic to hold.
It's a harder politic to hold.
It's the same thing they talk around for us as abolitionists. Is like, if you believe in restorative justice and transformative justice, that means that you have to believe that everybody can be restored. And that's complicated when you are personally then affected by whatever that is, because the other person on the receiving end has to then say, can this exist? And it's fun. When I was thinking around, when I was visiting El Salvador, I actually was thinking about this, because so much of what they are experiencing does sometimes restoration mean that you're integrated back in community, which is what happened in Rwanda, but they're not necessarily integrated back in community in El Salvador because they said, well, we're getting rid of the gang violence here. And so the people are probably better off being able to live a fuller life, because all of the gang violence that was happening there are now all currently incarcerated. Which is antithetical to abolition and restorative justice, right? However, does the good outweigh the bad, right? And that's where it gets a little dicey. So I've been fascinated by how this thing exists, and is there a space of restoration, or when you are overcorrecting a negative that happened within a community, do you have to have that bad press essentially in order to ensure like this utilitarianism approach is much more useful in this space? And that's what I thought was like fascinating, because when I was in El Salvador, I was just like, oh, and granted, I also did not see like as many Black people within El Salvador. And so I was like, oh, this is fundamentally different, which made me even think around like from a diaspora aspect. Black people across the world are still more engaged in a holistic restorative practice than non-Black people at large, which to me, it really was like, I was like, this feels fundamentally like, and I didn't like, in the space, it's hard to kind of talk around their government and just talk around like, oh, well, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but I can understand why he had to do it. Right.
I would argue that it's more related to, it's less based on race, and it's more related to what's the word, colonialism, and how colonizers have gone into nations, and on the basis of race from there, have brought in their principles. Which
is interesting, because El Salvador is absolutely destabilized by the U.S.
Oh, 100%.
And then they
100%.
came in and said, well, don't do it like that. They said, y'all brought the gangs with us. Why would you ever? And that's when a couple years ago, that's when the El Salvadorian president said, you lock people up for less in America.
So much less.
I said, eat them up.
So much less. And so like, here's my take on all of it. I think this kind of sums up, especially when we talk about restorative justice and decarceration, or prison abolitionists and all of that. I have this conversation. I have these talks with my therapist on a regular basis, actually, because like I need to make sure that your politic is also kind of aligned so that I can be healed in the right way.
Okay.
And have that space in the right way. But like, you know, one of the things she, you know, her and I talk about is like, nothing you do is worth punishment.
Oh.
It's radical as fuck. Yeah. Because that's not how.
Because why does it have to be punitive on this end?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Accountability does not equal punishment.
Yeah. Oh my God. Don't get me started. Because people want to be punitive so bad, but the reality is accountability can also engage in reflection. Mm-hmm. Accountability can also just be a conversation. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that. Don't get me started. Anyways, because that's gonna get me annoyed and another conversation. That's gonna derail. No, but I appreciate that hot take, and especially as we are baking this conversation in restoration, this politic that's not particularly popular because mm-hmm. people have to unlearn the punitive nature of like what was ingrained in us, because mm-hmm. we always say if something bad happens, there must be a negative consequence mm-hmm. and a punishment that happens. And so I'm thinking about this more so, especially as we are talking around this recent political moment that we were having, right? And I'm even more so thinking around last year around this exact time, we're angry. Me and you are pissed. As much organizing, as much as we tried every avenue to ensure that we do not get a Trump presidency again, being on the ground, canvassing, strategizing, organizing, trying to build out this new culture that is happening within more so a Black progressive movement. We're frustrated because at the end of the day, people did what they were going to do. We knew mm-hmm. like they were going to do what they do, but we also had engaged in a little bit of hope.
Yep.
Right. And I remember that being a time where both of us were deflated, dejected, pissed, and just being like, what is the point of what we are doing right now?
That journey actually put me on to where I am right now.
And that's why I wanted to start from a year ago today.
So, you know, I don't know if I articulated this well enough in that moment, but when we, you know, had this conversation on a podcast, but it did leave me feeling, what's the point?
Yeah.
What is not even just what's the point? Is the work that I do as a political organizer, as a strategist, as a person that works on campaigns, mm-hmm. that builds community, that encourages people to engage civically.
Yeah.
Am I keeping the same system of harm intact that says like, if you don't vote, like, or creating this belief of like civic engagement, mm-hmm. keeping the same systems of harm intact.
Yeah.
And I started to think about like, well, how does that look? Well, how does that show up for me? How does that show up when I'm in community with folks? And it led me to this deeper question. What is the path to First of all, do we want liberation?
Yeah.
What is liberation? Mm-hmm. And then what is the path to get there?
Right.
Is the path, and this is a question I'll pose this to you, and I know you interviewing me, but you know, conversation.
We're in conversation now.
But like
I don't have to get to know you. We're here.
It's your third time.
What it is my third time. All right, come on, let me throw my host gear
right,
on.
Come on.
But like is the path to liberation, you know, saying that let's just do hyper local, hyper small, right? Yeah. We ain't even got to go to the big level of like federal government or even state, right? But let's talk about like the local mm-hmm. county, the city that you're in. Right. Is the path to liberation to say we want all of those elected seats? Is that enough?
No.
Why?
Because it's a both and, right? Those elected seats, yes, please give us those. Mm-hmm. And I think the other piece is what I'm also realizing is that it does require a communal buy-in, mm-hmm. and it requires us to fully recognize, like, I think in that moment, it was like a F it, I'll do it myself moment mm-hmm. is what I learned. Yep. And I said, the reason I started doing the live podcast series was also to build that community, to actually be in touch with the folks and be able to actually see them.
Yeah.
And so for me, what I had realized is even when they fuck up on a local level, we still have a commitment to each other to get some stuff done. And so that's why my stuff it felt a little bit more grassroots in that space. But definitely I always say like our political space is never the end all be all.
Yeah.
Like I will always go back to the Young Lords and the Black Panther political party and stuff like that, because they recognized they had to have an integration into politics. But before they got into politics, they had to shift the culture of what was going on. Mm-hmm. So that required education, that required a capacity building. It required people to understand what does it mean to own your own shit. and go from there. And so I always believe it's a both and situation. Where I think the politics come in is because we need to have people in there who are able to create enough of a cushion for us.
Yep.
And that's where I was just like, I don't ever believe that politics is going to save us as a whole, but I think it can damn sure at least streamline some of the processes in place to make it easier for us to be at capacity to decide how do we want to be able to weigh out certain options instead of having to be reactionary a little bit more.
And that is the same kind of framing that I came to it.
Yeah.
And, you know, to distill it down even further, I was like, oh shit, if that's not the liberation, then what the fuck am I doing?
Yeah.
What is the work that I'm doing, the work that I'm holding, you know, I'm not working on a 40-hour work week like everybody else. I'm working an 80, 90-hour work week.
Yeah.
What does that mean for me?
Right.
For on my body, on my mind, on my patients, on my family. But then also, like, if that is not what liberation looks like, how I started to feel guilty of like, shit, am I like selling a pipe dream? Am I selling a pipe dream?
Am I leading my people
into a burning house? Am I leading my people into a burning house? Because under that same structure, even if we do get all of those seats, one, we're talking generations before that even happens. But even if it does, we're still governed by this like extractive capitalist system that is still perpetuating a level of harm to us.
Right.
And so
we're just having to navigate it differently.
We're
our relationship to it.
Exactly. We're negotiating our relationship with a power structure that is extractive of us.
Yeah, because at that point you have to get into your Marx and Fanon for real, because now we have to think around our relation to the capital, right? We have to think around how are we showing, are we the people who are owning the production or are we the ones producing? And so when we have to actually think around it from that perspective, oftentimes we're not the small percentage that is actually owning the thing. Right. We're actually producing the thing that keeps the 1, 2, 5% intact.
Right? And I started to realize that I wasn't the only one that was thinking about this. You know, I started doing some traveling. I was back and forth to DC this year. Yeah. I was in New York.
You was besides the vacation that is well deserved and earned, you were genuinely all over the place, and it was and all over the place in a space of like not like you're all over the place. No, you were literally like organizing and having conversation with so many different folks.
I was.
All throughout the East
I
Coast.
was also like outside because I was in Jamaica having fun. I was in Miami having fun. But I was in DC building with folks. I was in New York building with folks.
Yeah, you were. And we'll talk about that a little sooner.
And it also made me realize that like there are so many other Black people that are feeling exactly what I'm feeling right now, and they're not articulating it, or they don't know how to articulate it in the same way. And so I saw my role started to shift in this progressive politic. Going back to that hot take, which was like for the longest time, and again, if you know me, you're going to know that I talk about my therapist a lot. Yeah. And when I talk about this in therapy, she was like, it sounds like your orientation to your work was always looking externally to like the extreme right wing, to the most harmful fascist types of policies and people that are problematic to us, that have been colonizers, that have been, those that have enslaved us, that have been those who, supported Jim Crow. You thought your work was there, but instead your work is actually in the movement. Yeah. It's actually looking into our circle about how do we strengthen the community within us? Right. And how do we build it?
But I know you asked the question around like, am I living the liberation that I want? And it's interesting because in that moment, like I reference back to my trip to El Salvador because it's the first time in over 2 years that I actually feel like I had rest and was actually in the space that felt liberatory. And I was more so of like how I was existing, right? I was with some of my closest of friends, and I kind of look at my politic as an extension of how my closest friends and I interact with each other in terms of the mutual aid, in terms of the support, in terms of community building and showing up, and no matter where that's at. And so during that time, I had moments where like my nervous system didn't feel dysregulated on a consistent basis. I was around people who looked like me and I felt safe around for 4 days of bliss. But in that 4 days of bliss, it absolutely was able to dictate like having so much more space to think again, having so much more space to just like let my shoulders down and take my tongue off the roof of my mouth, unclench my jaw, literally doing everything that I needed to do that I have not been able to do as consistently somebody who's always making decisions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It felt nice to simply just be. And so right now I have pockets of my liberation, but I want to be able to engage in that on a regular basis. There are so many aspects of life right now that feel purpose driven and of service. And I get like this podcast world is a space where I can create the world that I want.
Yeah.
And kind of build out from there. But those are only pockets. So it's not necessarily sustainable from my idea of liberation. I have a personal space that I feel like I'm liberated in, but definitely as a Black person and somebody who cares deeply around the Black community, that does not feel like it has been attained just yet.
That's heavy. Yeah. That's really heavy because like one of the things that I also reflected on, especially being in the national spotlight and working in national politics. Yeah. Like, and also working in local politics at the same time, was this like, I can't fix the problems of the world. Yeah. I can't, it's gotta be hyper local.
Yes.
And so like, the pockets of liberation have to endure. Yeah. And have to become permanent. Yeah. On the path to liberation in your world. Right. And your world can't be the United States of America. No, your world can't even be, in some instances, the state of Pennsylvania. It has to be North Philly. It has to be your zip code. It has to be your apartment building. Yes. And that's that reframing of it is really difficult when we live in a society where we're online, we're being bombarded with all of the information, we're seeing the harms of the world around us, and we look at it as the harms happening to us. Right. And while we can be locked in solidarity, we can be locked in giving support out.
But that's not always my lived experience anymore.
No, it's not.
And that like legit being able to talk around having friends who can serve as mutual aid is a privilege in itself. Yep. Right. And so I think that's the thing that really kind of reckon is like, though we want the best for everybody, what I experience on a personal level is not what my siblings experience in this world. It's not what my neighbors who I'm friends with down the street. Yep. Right. Like these stupid niggas, I love them. They're out with the community every day. I know exactly like how to navigate them. Even like the one time Amazon decided that they were trying to leave my packages outside, but to know that I could call 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different people on this block or around this corner, I could hit each and every one of them and be like, hey, they just left my package on this thing. There's a lot of important equipment in there. Can somebody grab it? Yeah. And the fact that I had access to a minimum of 5 people within walking distance, that to me was just like, dang, I really got it. Somebody who lives downstairs. Yeah. Did not know who they were, but they knew of me because of the platform. And through that, they were just like, hey, just as an active community, we wanted to actually just reach out and introduce ourselves. Yes. Right. And so I was able to even ask them and hit them up and stuff like that. So to me, those are moments that I'm just like, even in my locus of community, I know that I'm not going to experience the worst of the world. Yeah. Despite seeing other spaces that I am around and kind of living in as well.
And not even just like you won't experience the worst of the world, that you can't solve the worst of the world's problems. Right. And you can be a part of what it means to strengthening your community. And then how does the community that you strengthen interact with the communities around you?
There we go.
But it's got to be a collective decision. It can't be on your shoulders, on your back. Right. And that's, what I've learned throughout this year, and from the lessons of not just last year and like the work that we did. And I've come, I said earlier about how like I started to feel guilty about the work and my position into the work. But understanding that I needed to go through that journey to get to this point. We all did. All of us Black people needed to understand that. It's one of the reasons why, I kind of been very vocal about this and have gotten some ire from folks around like the No Kings protest. Yeah. And like, I call it white people have been crashing out online and in public because Black people by and large have said, I'm good. Yeah. I'm good on that. Like we've been on the front lines. Our body has been used. Right. And if it is not being lent towards something strategic, but if it is also not being built towards what our true liberation looks like, I'm not interested in putting ourselves on the line.
And which I think is even more of an interesting point, because I actually agree with you in terms of like how the No Kings protest feels like it's been going out a little bit more. It feels a little bit more like still protesting is happening, and there's a large demonstration of folks that are not content. And there also feels like there's a performative aspect that is also beginning to happen that for me begins to fall short, because I noticed, like, I know probably less than a year ago, there was somebody who was like, there was, this protest isn't fun. Like, where's the DJs and where's all this other stuff? And I remember sitting there, I was like, oh, this cannot be an indicator. And granted, the people were white. So, man, you're living in a very different world from when we protest versus from when they protest.
Yeah.
But I think that's even more interesting, because thinking around the No Kings protest and knowing like there's a large group of Americans that are not content with what's happening right now, we still, now granted, it wasn't as large of a number, but still a large number of us that were showing up in this most recent election as well, that I thought was also interesting, that we are even seeing, like, not necessarily interesting, because most times if you're discontent with the world right now, you're going to flip to the other party.
Yep.
That's what happened with Trump presidency.
We're watching the pendulum swing back.
And so in that, you were also in New York with Mamdani and looking at the Working Families Party up in New York and organizing in that space. So what was that like to be able to see that momentum from that space around? And then from understanding that momentum, what are some of the implications that we can think around for other major cities that are experiencing these shifts?
Whew. All right. So I think the moment, it felt good being on the ground, honestly. Like, it felt good being on the ground with folks that understood the stakes of the moment.
Yes.
You know, I spent election day, I was in New York in the weeks leading up to election day, and then I was in New York on election day. And one of the first polling sites that I visited was in Brooklyn, with Black folks.
Yeah,
and
I'm very familiar with Brooklyn. It's my second home. Hey y'all.
and they were dope. Like, we had fun on the corner. Yeah. Tish James came out.
Come on.
You know, and was Attorney General in New York, and was out there taking photos with folks, talking to folks, engaging folks. And so I do think that moment, although like Zohran Mamdani is coming into the lexicon and into like the national political spotlight, to a lot of folks kind of like suddenly, how do we turn these moments into wins that's built on strategy that takes over a year?
Yeah.
You know, it takes a year to convince a non-voter to become a voter.
Right.
Like, on average, it takes a year. A person that is not a consistent voter to be a voter. Right. And so, like, understanding that and knowing that, how do we bake that into the work that we do, and not like 6 weeks before election day, not 6 months before election day,
because it's a slow roll.
It's a slow roll. Like, I don't know you. I gotta build trust with you. I gotta feel like you have my best interests at heart. I gotta feel like you're gonna fucking fight for me.
Right.
And so, like, they did that in New York, and the energy was palpable. The fear that I have is that this becomes the Obama thing again.
Yeah.
And
how do we not do that same thing of just being like, hey, this is somebody who.
One of those keys, man.
I'm gonna say, because right now it should just be Cody. But I think that's even more interesting, is because we don't want to become enamored with this person, right? Because at the end of the day,
they're there to serve us.
They still have to serve us, right? And so that's what I was also thinking about. Is just like, no, I am excited because it felt like across the board, Democratic, Socialist, Working Families parties, there were significant wins across the board, which was really exciting to see, because it shows me that there's a recognition that there is something new that people want, and the establishment is not that, right? And so they've been falling on deaf ears, but now we have to remind people, yes, you can be a fan of this person, but once they become the person in that position, you have to hold them accountable. Make them do their fucking job. They have to do their job and stand up to what they know.
And don't go home. Because we especially in Philly, especially in PA, we got an election every 6 months.
Yes.
Don't go home. Don't clock out. We need you to fucking lock the fuck in on what is happening on the municipal level. Look at what's going on in Philly right now with the current mayor is like capitulating to Trump and like rolling back all of these DEI practices.
Anticipatory obedience really be frying me.
It's insane. It's literally insane. Like to first of all, there was a huge scandal within the DEI office where they ended up firing Brandy Blocker for that nonsense that took place.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Like there were already this attempt and effort to roll back DEI practices and policies. Right. And within the administration, within the government, this wasn't even something that was like public facing to like policy wise. This was about like how is diversity, equity, inclusion being represented within just the city government. Right. And on that level, we had a mayor that was problematic and then fired the person and made it difficult for them to do their job. And then now is publicly saying within businesses, within small businesses, that DEI isn't a practice anymore. Right. And
this isn't the first time she said that, right? No. Like this has happened before of just like the focus isn't necessarily going to be DEI at this point. And so when you are no longer doing that intentional work, who ultimately begins to benefit in fundamentally different ways, right? Because when they are benefiting in those different ways, you no longer have a hyper focus on who you were intended to serve at first, right? You're no longer focused in on the actual community and the Black community that ultimately blindly voted for you to be in this space. And that's something we have to just be able to admit out loud. Right, it's symbolic to have the first Black woman mayor, 100th mayor, everything. But that's why I was sitting there. I was just like, I want us to vote beyond just identity. Do they actually have your liberation in mind? And when you are thinking around this position, I'm not saying the person has to be over idealistic, but this person also demonstrated to us what she truly believed in ahead of the fact, which is why we're seeing so many folks. I was like, y'all forget that we see this mayor get booed at the Roots picnic. Y'all forget that we see this mayor get booed at the Eagles stuff. Y'all forget that we are seeing somebody who actively went against what your best wishes were. But so many of us are engaging in blind protectionism versus actually being like, nah, this was some shit. I said, y'all, she's a stop and frisk person. She's still of the generation that is tough on crime mayors. We saw what that was going on with all of these tough on crime mayors. They're getting up out of here.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And so I think that's been interesting to me is like watching the same slow roll of culture building that they did with Project 2025, right? They're doing a similar thing from not necessarily the traditional established Democratic Party, but there's also that other space that's more so being spoken to, right? Because now we have Kamala Harris going on tour and being like, well, no, we should have said some of these things a little bit more. Yeah. Which is a slap in the face to folks who were saying, hey, if you stand on business, we'll bang with you.
Yep.
But New York demonstrated that if you stand on business, we'll bang with you. For Pottstown to have a trans mayor.
Yep.
Pottstown, conservative Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Is a demonstration on how folks are no longer interested in the establishment because people are in pain and people are feeling the effects and your life is fundamentally tougher under certain mayors and fundamentally tougher under Trump.
And this is why I say, as I've reflected this year, my work is meant to be internally within the movement.
Yeah.
Because it's not enough to say we want to elect somebody that aligns with our policy and our values. We do want to do that. But how do we get there? What is the path? What is the training? What is the curriculum? What is the community building and the infrastructure that allows them to run a strategically efficient campaign and then can be governed with those same policies in mind?
Right.
And historically, that has not always been the system and the structure. It's been like, does this person agree with our values and align with our values? Yes, great. Let's get them to run. And it's like, that's not enough. That's not enough. Is the community behind you? Does the community know who you are?
Yeah.
Are you building community? Are you being intentional of what it means to kind of coalition build and to get support of not just like the political infrastructure, which largely consists of like nonprofits, unions, and what we call base building organizations? Right. Or are you interested in getting the support for folks that run rec centers and that run football programs and basketball programs? These are the people who are directly serving families. Yeah. And that is something in Philadelphia that the establishment Democratic Party does really, really well. Yeah. They understand how to consolidate that support within the community really, really well. They do things like the street renamings and get that support, right? Yeah. Which is largely symbolic. Yeah. Largely doesn't mean a goddamn thing.
But it's also meaning that you know the people that have caused a good impact.
Exactly. Yeah. It means showing them love. Yeah. And we need love shown on us, right? Yeah. And so from the movement space, how can we do a better job of doing that? Right. How can we do a better job of supporting people who are doing mutual aid, that had their food stamps cut recently, who are about to have their healthcare be thrown off their healthcare? What are we, or their healthcare prices going up, right? How do we support the people? Not just how do we support the people who are impacted by that, but how do we support the people that took upon themselves to say, I'm going to create a fucking mutual aid fund, even though I make $50,000 a year, but I got a network of people. How do we support that person? Yeah, and because that person can get 100 people. Yep.
Because
they're connected to the people. Yeah. And that's our progressive movement needs to do a better job of that. Yeah. And to me, that's where my focus is shifting internally in our work.
And I love that, because I think that's exactly what people have largely said. And I put up a poll within my story and my channel just to kind of feel like, where are people feeling in terms of like this election? Where are people feeling politically? And right now there are folks who are politically hopeful right now. There are a lot of folks who are also just like waiting to see what are some of the barriers that a lot of folks are coming up against, because there's a fear of a lot of the democratic socialists taking over in these spaces. There's a fear of what it means for the Working Families Party, but the community is actually electing these folks as well. And so there's obviously, I think, going to what you're talking around is what is going to be necessary on this end is to actually create language and be able to articulate the issues and pain points of our communities in order to turn that into actionable policy. Hey, this is going to be very tough for this holiday season. Here's how we can help you on a ground level, because we need something actionable, right? Yep. And I think that's where a lot of folks are going to say, when I feel this, I need this, and here's what we're doing. Yeah. That's it. And so I appreciate what you were saying in that, because that's where we're able to capacity build, meet people where they're at, and also be able to say this policy will fix or make this need manageable at this moment in time.
So there's been this a lot of talk around like the Democratic Socialists, which if folks who don't know, DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, is largely white. Yeah. Like, let's call it what it is. It's largely white.
They are
like white. Young people who believe in socialism, which this is, idea that I'm going to butcher like the real definition of it. So let me actually not do it. Good. But like the idea is that like socialist policies and politic actually should benefit us, right? Like socialism is things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps.
I was going to say there are socialist systems that are already in place.
Yeah, we live in a socialist society. Like, let's stop fucking playing. And so I think the problem, like what people have started to do is they've tried to attach this idea that being progressive or being a socialist is white.
Yeah. But in reality, I'm so sorry. Like I get so frustrated with that idea, because I'm like I go on this rant all the time of just like, y'all benefit to sit out last year when Angela Davis and a few other Black Panthers came to Philly to talk to all the Black educators. She said something that will always ground me, is part of our sacrifice from our generation allows us to sit in this fancy ass room today. Yeah. And you don't even realize that that's less than 50 years ago.
Yes.
Right. And so much of what y'all are talking about requires you to internally have to battle your own ideas, because you want to be able to achieve on this idea of individualism. But in reality, the Black Panther Party is also
was the socialist party. What are
you talking about? like a lot of your radical thinkers from the Harlem Renaissance.
the like black establishment of the Democratic Party have abdicated that space to white people.
Yes.
Like quite frankly. And so, you know, our tradition, our foundation has been in a black radical politic that has been about giving free food to people who can't afford it. That's been about
the free breakfast program.
The free breakfast program. That's been about supporting people because government just said we're not going to because you're black. Right. And so we have to be grounded in that foundation, and we also have to reclaim some of that space because that narrative becomes harmful to the poorest black people. To say that like this space is, you know, these are white gentrifiers coming in
telling you all these other ideas.
And like to some degree, sometimes they are.
Yes.
But like it's also about policy that impacts the poorest people in the community, and very often they are black people. And I don't mean to say like I want to specify black people because sometimes we get into the whole like people of color thing. No, like they're fucking black people who are poor, who are being on welfare, who are being thrown off welfare, who families are being broken because, you know, the dad is being taxed because the mom chose to go on welfare. Like all of that shit is a product of the system extracting from us. And so as black people, we have to understand that our politic has always been rooted in socialism. And we have to reclaim what it means to be a part of that politic and create those spaces for us and hopes that it reclaims that narrative.
Dang. I appreciate that so much because I think that's the piece that we need to like lean into so much more is like damn near like the black radical tradition needs a good PR strategy right now. Once again, because it feels so unattainable and people have made it seem like it's much more idealistic. But in reality, once you just kind of going back to almost like my idea of liberation is that's what's in your locus of control, what's in your block radius, what's in this thing that is going to allow you to help out with the rest of the community. And so I appreciate that note because I really do believe like your politics should be an extension of how you treat some of your closest friends in your close friend group. And then based on how, and okay, ideally if you're a good friend to your people, but in that space, do you support each other? Is there mutual aid involved? Is there emotional support and capacity building? And when somebody is struggling, are you able to support them in a different kind of way, right? And so I think with that extension could extend into your politic that can go right into a further policy. So it's an idealized version of what this friendship group should look like, or family unit should look like, chosen family should look like. And most likely it's really the underground ballroom scene, but it's another story for another day. In terms of like this subcategory of friends can extend into how can this feel like a good policy ultimately.
And I mean, you know, going back to where you started with, right? You said like there like a good PR strategy. It needs somebody to be fucking bold. Like somebody to say
a decentralized movement won't work anymore.
It won't. Like we people are itching for somebody to just say, I'm fucking fighting for you. I'm fucking fighting. I'm going to throw down for you. I'm not going to speak with the same polished, you know.
You need somebody raw, somebody straight to the point.
You need that rawness because we are tired of being talked down to. We're tired to be told to wait. We're tired of being told that we got to be more strategic or we got to be more this or more that. Like, show me you willing to fucking throw down for me. Because my family can't eat. My bills are high. It's struggling to find a job. I'm working 2 jobs. I got to get my kid in school. Like, throw the fuck down for me. And say it with your chest and don't be apologetic about it. And that is what's missing in our politics right now. Somebody willing to do that in a deep way. And I actually believe that person is not about like, are they going to run for a particular office? It's got to come from the community.
I love that. And I think that's a really good note to like leave on too, is just like, who's willing to take that mantle and what does that begin to look like? And own that responsibility, but also going back and realizing it doesn't have to fall all on one person as long as they have a grounded network that's willing to support and care for them in that moment too. And so, dog. I'm so glad that we were able to have this conversation because there's so much more. I know We'll be back again and again, especially as we think around some more political roundups and whatnot, to really kind of discuss like what is this leading up to, particularly within the midterms, and then from the midterms and on, that we really got to be thinking about. And so I appreciate you and thank you for the work that you're doing. And honestly, just happy for you to be up here talking some shit again. Yeah.
I'm good for talking shit.
Okay.
He gave me a drink, Uncle Nearest, whiskey, so I might be talking a little bit more shit than I usually. That's not true. That's definitely not true. That's my fault. A fault of mine of like, you get me to start talking, I'm gonna talk some shit.
And I live for it. You don't gotta tell me twice.
Yeah.
Shit. But Salaah, let the people know where they can find you if you want to let people know what you got going on next and go from there.
Yeah, so you can follow me on all platforms at Salaah's Corner. What I'm working on right now, what I talked about, my hot take that I led with, I'm actually putting that into a book that I'm writing. Right now I'm doing some deep research around it, but it's really about like how progressive movements reorder the systems of caste. The purpose is meant for us to be reflective about how we show up in the work and how we build community, so that we can build community that sustains us and doesn't burn us out. And then the other thing that I'm working on is, this is kind of more hush hush, but the thing that I talked about, that space that like we need people to be bold. I'm working on creating that space. That's a little bit more hush hush. I can't talk too much about it.
But when it's here, we'll know.
But there's a collective of folks that have been convening and that are coming through it with that same energy. And so we're talking about what that potentially looks like. And so I'm excited about both of those.
Let's freaking go. Y'all, it is another episode of Keeping It a Bean. I'm so excited to continue to see where this journey is at. Let us know what you think about this conversation, whether it's thinking around the role of politics right now, this movement and momentum that we're experiencing right now. What are your thoughts on Zohran Mamdani? If you're Philly and local, like, how are you also contributing to this ecosystem? It's very important that we know what that role is at this time in order for us to be able to amplify and support in those ways too. And so this is another episode. Thank you for keeping it a beam with me. Team, we did another one. Thank y'all in the back. Yeah. And we will see y'all next week. Peace.
Peace.